Welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Flecha, and joining me as always is my good friend, Mr. John Juggling Nelson. John, what are you doing over there, man?
You know, I'm just trying to work on my juggling skills. I find that it's not actually about focusing on the oranges. It's about the balance, making sure you're just handling. You know, life gives you lemons or throws oranges at you. You got to be ready to juggle them and find the right place for them. So.
I like it. I like it. My only ask is that for the rest of this podcast, can you continue to juggle, and we'll see how well you can load balance. Well played. Well played. Yeah. So as you may or may not know, we are doing here on Virtually Speaking a series on the advanced services for VCF. We've had some great conversations for the past couple of weeks. This one is certainly going to be no exception. We're talking about Avi Load Balancer. We are not alone. We've asked a good friend of ours from Virtually Speaking to join us on this podcast, Mr. Jad El-Zein. Jad, welcome back.
Hello. Good to be back.
Very good. Also, our subject matter expert for today is Nathan McMahon. Nathan, welcome to Virtually Speaking.
Welcome. Thanks for having me on. I apologize I didn't practice my juggling skills in advance.
You know, this is your area of expertise. I'm a little disappointed. You should definitely have already started juggling when John did. That would have balanced the load a little bit, but no.
Fair point.
All right. No.
But just to be sure, Nathan, did you get it? Did you get the joke?
I'm going to go over this over and over again after. It's going to hit me about 7 p.m. tonight. Okay.
All right.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. So we're talking Avi Load Balancer. Nathan, real quick, before we even dive into it, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're from Broadcom. Tell us a little bit about what your background is.
Sure. So I'm with Broadcom, with VMware, with Avi Networks. And I was originally started with Avi Networks about 13 years ago when it began. So I've been there for a little while now as the first product manager, and now I help customers understand how to leverage load balancing in their environments. Prior to Avi, I spent another 13 or so years at another startup, a company called F5 Networks. So I've been in the load balancing space for a bit over, 25 years, called since the last century.
Yeah, so I'd say that's been a while. I'm sure this is not the first time you've seen someone try to juggle, but I won't bring back the juggling joke. Okay, so you mentioned you have a lot of conversations with customers, so I'm sure this first question is going to be certainly familiar to you. But for someone that's not deep into networking, what exactly is load balancing, and why is it important?
At its most basic level, when you go to an application or to a website, there's not one server. If there's one server, that server dies, that application's dead. So you have many of them for both high availability and for just performance reasons. To do that, though, you need to have a traffic cop sitting in front, and that's going to distribute load traffic to the fastest, best available server.
So I guess, just trying to level set here, what's different, what's special about Avi? Because, if I'm going to go with load balancer, in my little, and people who's in their home labs or something, they may have used something like HA proxy, or maybe they might have, I don't know, just been a complete savage and done round robin DNS or something in front of their servers, or have some type of VIP running on a core switch somewhere. Why Avi versus just the most basic of finding a ways to balance some or to get some connections to some servers? What all does it do special, so to speak?
Sure. If you look 10, 20 years ago, a lot of the themage was around faster and speeds and feeds. And then it became more and more around functionality a decade-ish ago. But now what we're seeing is that the number of applications are growing. The number of apps that a typical engineer has to manage, say, today versus 5 years ago has gone up exponentially. You look 5 years from now, it continues to go up. A lot of the challenges that we're seeing with customers in the industry today is around scale. Being able to manage this many applications, growing applications, and do so in a way that doesn't involve a 6-week ticketing process. You're opening tickets like a caveman, as you're just constantly having to do things.
Yeah, we have automation up until we open the ticket with the guy who then goes and knows some obscure, CLI on some load balancer.
Precisely. So a lot of really what Avi has been all about is saying, okay, the speeds and feeds are there. The functionality that customers need is pretty well understood. What's not been solved is an ability to make this be scalable. And by scalable, we mean on the OpEx side of things, where you can do the same amount of work and you can do it in 1/10 the time, 1/10 the effort, to be able to automate that element. And so that's really where Avi shines, is to be able to reduce the amount of OpEx, the amount of time it takes to do things by 90%.
So getting that provisioning to where that's part of my automation workflow and I'm not having, I mean, I'm sure Avi has a great UI, but I'm not having to go to it to go set up deploy a new app.
Correct. There's a lot of different ways you can go about this. And automation doesn't mean just sitting there typing away and writing your own scripts and writing your own Python or writing, Terraform or Ansible. It's a lot of different things. It means that the Avi needs to talk to the world around itself. It needs to know who to talk to pick up an IP address, to pick up an SSL certificate in order to accomplish all of these tasks, to add a pull to the firewall for this new application. All of these are all tasks that previously would take an individual ticket and add to this extensive process and the number of people that have to touch this process. So it's about a lot of different things, but it's about being able to make this be a singular workflow for the application owner.
So with, again, load balancing, moving away from, I guess, those caveman, one of the challenges I had back in the day, like in my own lab, I was setting up a round robin DNS, very basic, connection load
Mhm.
balancing. But the challenge was that I don't have awareness of state. And I know that's something that, fancy load balancers can do, is you have some awareness of health and apps. What does Avi do to understand what's going on in that connection? Like, what is what types of capabilities does it have in terms of making sure that I'm connecting to a healthy server, or that it's properly
Okay.
configured, or monitoring performance? Like, what all can y'all do, and what's special there?
There's two elements to this. First element is that you do a synthetic check. So every 10 seconds, we're going to send an HTTP GET, look for this page to come back, and it's great, it's working. And then for the next 10 seconds until we run the next check, we're going to go and send in a million real client requests. And then we just hope that they all work. But there's also then what you do is you layer that with a passive health check. And that passive health check says we're monitoring every single connection, every single request, every single flow of live customer traffic. And if we're seeing that that server is sending back 50% of the responses are 503 errors, or, slow down, the servers are busy. Let's start sending those requests. Instead of sending that response back, let's just let's grab the original request, send it to another server. And it's all transparent to the end user, to the client. But this way we're saying we're monitoring every transaction, every request, every connection.
So are you monitoring that in band, like you're sitting in the HTTPS path, or are you pulling it off like a
Yes.
syslog feed off the web server?
No, we're a load balancer, which means we are in line with the traffic. We're full TCP proxy, we're full SSL proxy, we're full HTTP proxy. So all the way through, you are negotiating HTTP with me, with the load balancer. And then I will open up a new connection, a new flow, a new HTTP request to the backend application server. So it's something where we are absolutely in band as a layer 4 through layer 7 load balancer, rather than just a pass through. We're not a smarter switch. It's not a like we did
Yeah,
switching and
yeah.
added layer 4 to it. It is layer 7. And that's a little bit of the difference between a layer 4 load balancer and a layer 7. So layer 7 is it basically means you are a full proxy. You understand the application flow, and you are brokering that.
Sorry, Don, we just recently had a very animated, can I say animated discussion with our friend Chris on vDefend.
Mhm.
And it was all about security and everything like that. But interestingly, Avi and most worthy load balancers sit in a position that gives them a lot of power when it comes to security, a lot of visibility, a lot of capability at that point. Because essentially, a lot of that traffic flows through the Avi, front end or the load balancers. So, do you take advantage of that in Avi? Like, how do you take advantage of it? I should ask.
Absolutely, because we're a full application proxy. That means we understand, like in the case of HTTP, you have to send a valid HTTP request before I'll even pass it through. So if you're sending me a half-formed request, if you're sending me a DOS attack, that's not going to go further. But we can layer upon that things like web application firewall. So we're not just saying who can talk to who. Like a firewall says these clients can talk to that server on port 80. Like that's nice, but a WAF says what are they allowed to say to each other? So for instance, you're not allowed to request the database, or for instance, you're supposed to be typing into this form field an address, and 99% of people all type in a 5-digit zip code. You send a SQL command. That doesn't look right. So these are the additional functionalities that you're layering on top of the load balancer. When we say load balancer, it's not just spamming packets. We are the front end, the front door to these applications. Additionally, though, if we do see something that we don't like, we can pass that off to things like the advanced threat protection from vDefend. So we actually are hooking into this. So we are part of that same mechanism where we see something we don't like, let's push that out to them, and they can sit out of band. And we're just saying, based upon the request you're making, based upon the fact that we've identified that you're coming to a Tor proxy, or you're coming from a country we don't do business with, or various ways of identifying and classifying who the users are, and then establishing the level of security that we want to enforce with this.
Okay. So I know this is an advanced service for VMware Cloud Foundation. What does the integration look like for VCF?
Avi's very, very intimately tied into VCF, and we have been into things like vCenter forever and NSX as well. But with VCF specifically, what happens is what makes Avi unique about the load balancers out there? Every load balancer you see out there is going to be an appliance in some way, shape, or form. Hardware, software, same. What I mean by that is under the hood, I have a CPU. On that CPU, I'm running control plane and data plane services. With Avi, we separate that out into the separate controller and separate data plane. And that allows us to individually scale out and manage each of them separately. So it's a little bit more of an automated system because you are going to be managing the controller, and the controller is then managing the data plane or the service engines. So the controller will automatically spin up, manage, configure, and delete or destroy any of the service engines, the data plane processing. If it needs more capacity, we spin up more service engines. We do that by the Avi controller, which sits out of band. It's going to talk to VCF and say, I need more capacity. Let me just go and spin up a couple more service engines. We're running active, active, active. And so let me go and add another 100 gigs of capacity if I need. It's going to do that automatically by talking to VCF. It's going to do that by talking to vCenter. It can talk to NSX on the networking side. We need to allow the firewall to be able to talk to these new service engines. So it's all the way throughout this entire process. The Avi controller, think of this as I'm hiring an intern, telling it to go and manage my load balancing fleet for me. As long as everything is good, great. If not, come back and let me know. But otherwise, my people talk to your people. The Avi controller is now going to be talking to all of the infrastructure around us, not just VCF, but also extend that out into things like your SSL certificate authority, into something like into DNS, into IPAM. So all of that is happening automatically. It's just part of a single workflow. I just say, I want to deploy an application, and that's it. And it says, great, it's done. What capacity is that going to need? Is that going to need 1 megabit? Is that going to need 1 terabit? As an application owner, that's your problem. For lobbies, that's exactly what the controller is doing. The controller sits out of band and is able to manage all of that by integrating with the infrastructure around it.
It's wild to me that you can scale just by adding another, I assume fairly beefy VM that adds another 100 gigs of layer 7 throughput. Because I remember, I feel like load balancers almost had this mystique around them that they've got to be FPGAs and fancy hardware, and for some reason a 400,000 lumen light has to be on the load balancer. Like it's got to be this blinding. It's like the North Star of the data center. If you get lost, go find one of those things. And weirdly, I think a bunch of them were in Broadcom's, red and white color. But instead, we just have a VM that's just spawning here with 100 gigs of throughput, where I feel like I would have spent $500,000 on that, back in the day, just for that instance. And a very heavy box would have had to show up. But that's just a VM
Correct.
that's getting deployed.
Correct. There's several reasons for this. One of which is functionally speaking, it is exactly the same thing as what you're doing on these dedicated FPGAs. We're doing this on Intel processors. And it's not just native Intel processors. Intel's added a lot of the functionality into the processor itself to be able to perform and to be able to do this. You're seeing this.
x86 is an x86. The AES offload engines absolutely rule at crushing TLS offload now. So
QAT2 from Intel. Look at that. There you go. It's just the numbers are
QAT
staggering.
for the parallels. That's how you get all the
And now
threading.
so now you're seeing things like a 6x improvement in performance from one processor generation to the next. It's kind of mind blowing. But you're seeing this as well in the way that we handle a lot of other things, like the way we pick up the packets, push them off the NIC, push them into the CPU. So Intel's added a lot of functionality around this concept of NFV, network function virtualization. So we're able to pick up a lot of these advances that they've taken those learnings from what people have done in dedicated ASICs, rolled it into the native CPU, and that CPU can take on whatever personality it needs to. If it's a web server, an app server, or a load balancer or a firewall, and we're taking advantage of that, rolling that straight in. And this is part of how we're striping this traffic across active, active, active across many service engines. So if you're in something like VCF, we can actually distribute traffic across 64 service engines. So if each one of these service engines, if you give them 10 gig NICs, if you give them 100 gig NICs, give enough
6.4
CPU,
terabit of throughput.
it's just correct on a single application.
All right. Well,
Yeah, like I
now
said,
that I
the
have
speeds
half
and
the
feeds.
internet talking to my cluster. By the way, Pete,
the
this is
speed.
now a hardware podcast. I know we're talking about cloud software, but this is now a hardware podcast.
Yeah, John wants to also put in a request for a blue light to go on the VM. If you could make that happen, that would be great.
So Nathan, let's dial it down a little bit. What if I didn't want to do that? I mean, we've all heard of Nginx, right? Nginx.
Mhm.
and it works. And in fact, half of microservices in the world use it. In like microservices front end and other front ends, and labs love it. HA proxy, another one. Why not? Why can't I? Like, why would I make the leap from that to
Correct.
Avi?
I'll go back to my original statement, which was speeds and feeds were solved 10, 20 years ago. They really are. People don't generally need, these kinds of absurd numbers. The functionality, Nginx has got fantastic functionality. That's been solved. It comes back to management and scale. For instance, let's say if you have all of these load balancers around in your different data centers around in your environment, one of them fails. You're in a world of hurt. You've got to go out. Somebody's got to go and fix this. Got to go install a new one. Has to go and figure all of this out. With Avi, the controller's doing that for me. It self heals, spins up a new service engine, replace the failed one. We're right back to where we were in seconds. And if I'm running active across 100 service engines, I lost 1% capacity in the fabric, and it's healed again seconds later. With Nginx, that's not how it works. You just lost your applications. Somebody's going to have to come in off of their vacation to come and figure out how to go and install. And it's a very different world. It's a very high touch world. That's one of the core differences. But extend that out across the fact that our control plane architecture, we separate the data plane from the control plane. The data plane, that's the load balancer. It's just pounding packets as fast as it can, doing the work. But it's a full proxy. It sees everything that's flowing through this traffic. It's sending metadata back to the controller. So the controller has a view into every single flow that's going through it. The controller can give you intense visibility and analytics of what's happening. And it's doing it out of band. So in other words, you can be sorting through, slicing and dicing, looking through logs, everything, and troubleshooting in real time, live, without interrupting data plane flows, which means you can solve some remarkably complex problems. And that's another really key issue here, is that the needle in the haystack. Having worked in this industry for a very long time, one of the things I learned is that the application team blames the network team blames the app. And eventually they agree to disagree and blame the device in the middle, and that would be me. So there I am at 2 in the morning out in the data center, freeze my tail off trying to figure out what's going on. It turns out, whatever. And that's the point of that, having that visibility and analytics, and layer this in with, pardon my marketing here, layering this in with artificial intelligence. We used to call them algorithms, but now it's AI. But this intelligence can then be able to look through this and say, hey, we think that we have a problem here, and we think this is the problem. This is the resolution to that problem. It's pretty remarkable.
Fun fact,
I'm curious.
50% of all Kubernetes is fronted by Nginx. Also, fun fact, in March, like next month or March 2026, no more security updates for Nginx. So that 50% is now scrambling to find load balancing or a replacement. So I kind of that would suck to be in that position right now.
I'm curious what your experience is. I know you talk to a lot of customers. Like, what are some of the more common failures you see, whether it's in Kubernetes or even in just traditional workloads? What are some of the more common failures you see?
With Avi, or just the industry in general?
Well, not certainly like, HR and people, but no, yeah, specifically to Avi, I guess.
I know it's one of the quirkier ones, but when people are migrating to Avi, one of the things that's interesting is that most load balancing vendors out there intentionally mislead a little bit on the SSL capacities that customers need. They blend SSL, new transactions per second, with reused transactions, and give you one singular number, which is your SSL TPS. So most people tend to come in a little bit hot when they want to buy Avi, and they end up wanting something that's in the neighborhood of 10x what they need. And so that's something that's always a surprise for people, just by not being able to see and break down the correlation of new TPS versus reused TPS. New is expensive. It's a new handshake. Reused is basically, it's a free operation saying, yep, client server agree to continue that, carry on. So that's one area where people tend to go, I get this, it's a polite argument where, like, you can spend more money, you can do what you want, but the other thing is that when people are coming in off of other vendors, they generally have one virtual service for HTTP, one for HTTPS, and the one redirects to the other. Obviously, a model, yes, you can do all of that, but a lot of times what happens if we just do a direct migration, we have migration tools that suck in your configuration from something like an F5 or an older load balancer, convert it directly into Avi, and we can do that, but we always kind of have to spend a little bit of time, and let's go and look at this, because we can have one virtual server with two listeners, one on 80, one on 443. If you come in on HTTP, automatically redirect you. We cut your config in half. So it's a little bit of like, you can just hit the migrate button the easy button. And the marketing says, yeah, hit the easy button, it all works. True. But if we put a little bit of effort in, we can actually cut that config in half, cut the complexity in half, really reduce this. Customers that are coming from F5, every customer has intense eye rolls where they've gone through and done a ton of customized scripting. 80% of all that can just go away. Just wipe that away, point click native functionality in Avi. And it's very much by design. Yes, you can do custom scripting. You can ski off the deep end of the pool, but the point is you don't have to. And so there's a little bit of some of those issues that we see when customers first come in, where it's like you kind of like carefully guide, like pause, throw away the marketing for a second, take a look at what we can do here, because there's maybe better ways to do things.
Yeah, I mean that all makes a lot of sense, and just to do a little bit of transition here, we're making a lot of noise, again, buzzword, platform engineering, and IDPs and all that, and all these different pieces and parts that VCF provides a foundation for to complete that picture, right? And the whole point of where we sit in that whole strategy is we provide the foundation for an IDP, but we also provide a lot of ability to plug in and consume it the way the developer or the platform engineer or the enterprise requires it to be. So roll your own tools or bring your own tools and so on. Anyways, that's a long way of saying Avi is often brought in as part of what the VCF platform is, but actually Avi is an advanced service, hence this series, right? So this is a two-sides question. One is, do you see Avi on its own outside of VMware environments, and specifically in modern app and Kubernetes environments, or do you see that fitting better with this strategy that I just laid out with VCF? Like what balance of customers are you seeing out there, and how are they using it?
That's a tricky question to answer, but initially, VMware's acquisition of Avi very much was around the fact that their concept was it didn't matter where the applications go, they wanted VMware to go with it. So obviously we work very, very well with VMware, integrate tightly with VMware, but we did even before that acquisition happened. We also integrate with Google Cloud, with Amazon, with Azure, with that same similar integrations that we'd have with them, so that you could use this one Avi deployment, one Avi controller, and you could have multiple data centers. And that controller can manage load balancers or service engines in different environments, different clouds. From a management perspective, you just see them all in one list and say, here's my applications. They're all green, they're all healthy, or not. And I can send a single API to Avi and say, I want to make this change. And it's making a change in Azure, in Google, in on-prem, on VCF, in Kubernetes, and treat them all as just one deployment of all of my apps, even though they are in multiple locations, multiple clouds, multiple data centers.
When oftentimes I feel like sometimes the multi-cloud stuff gets like over marketed, but from a load balancer perspective, when people do have apps that they try to do for distribution reasons or geo, do you do GSLB so you can do?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely, yes. Yeah, from a customer, from an application owner perspective, the challenge is that if you were to go into one public cloud, you'd use their proprietary load balancer. If you want to be multi-cloud, then you have another proprietary load balancer. If you want to be on-prem, you use a hardware load balancer. And so now you have application owners that are having to learn 3 different sets of UIs or 3 different APIs.
And how to secure them properly, and
you can see where that's going to go south real fast. And the point of this is having one interface into all of these and have it be a consistent interface, regardless of what's on the other end.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily work the other way. Like, you're not going to get some of these hyperscaler load balancers doing the same for all the other platforms, right?
Never.
Now, okay. So from a platform engineering perspective, I introduced this topic. I kind of already left it, but there's this concept of paved roads, right? Which are curated workflows for consumption, right? And it's the platform engineer's job to do that. Now, Avi is tricky. Security in general is tricky when we start talking about like self-service. But if I were to take this concept of paved roads, how do I make this available so that it's consumed in a self-service way, and aligns with essentially what we're doing across VCF? How do we do that without it turning into a security and ticketing nightmare?
I think one of the coolest things that's come out in a long time is the blueprints in VCF. That's a fantastic direction. And the power of that is growing exponentially as they're adding new features, functionality, version to version. So for us, that's something that I personally am most excited about because you can pre-build that blueprint, you can copy paste it and modify it a little bit per application, but then you can maintain a lot of consistency through that so that it's just a single push a button, answer a couple of questions in a simple workflow, and that gets you right through there. And that, I think that's fantastic because that's what people are looking for is that level of no tickets had to be opened. All of these things happen behind the scenes. When you're going through the blueprint, I just go and answer what's the name of my application, how many I want to have 4 servers spun up. I want them to be Ubuntu, whatever it might be. There you go. And then they don't want to know how many gigs of throughput it might take, or they don't want to know things, all the details about how a load balancer works. The load balancer should figure that out for them.
Yeah.
Everything above that and everything on the other side of it. Think of the load balancers. We sit between the application app and the network, and we're providing that bridge between the two. We want to mask all the complexity below that. Yes, there's somebody on the other end of this who manages the load balancer, who manages VCF. They need to have that infrastructure awareness, but everybody above that line, above the fold, they don't. They manage their application, keep it simple, allow them to self-service, allow them to troubleshoot, and now you can eliminate 90% of all tickets. And that's where we have to go.
And I think the magic also is when you don't have to think about it at all, right? If your manifest calls for a load balancer and it happens to be provisioned into VCF, all of that stuff just happens automatically, right? It should just
Mhm.
all be done in the background exactly how the application needs it and following the lifecycle.
Sure.
That's another.
There's some other things that Avi's done to really help make this be easy, make this be consistent. If you want to go and code things via APIs, if you want to get into a Terraform and Ansible, there's other toolings as well that can also be utilized. Fantastic. Those are all
Yeah.
options. Um, One of the things about Avi is that Avi is built upon a REST API. It's not a bolt-on. And that's a very different way. If you look at the load balancing products that are out there in our market, these products have all been out there for 20, 25 years or so. And as such, that's not how things were done 25 years ago. They've added or bolted on APIs and these types of capabilities. In fact, if you look at just about every single CVE or Sub 1 that you see with these vendors over the last, say, 5, 10 years, almost every single one has something to do with security vulnerabilities in the add-on APIs that they've had. And that's very alarming. With Avi,
Mhm.
we only have one way to manage Avi, and that is via API. And on top of the API, there's wrappers for things like PowerShell and Ruby and you name it. But there's also wrappers such as a CLI and a GUI. Those are just wrappers that sit on top of the API. So your browser's not sending and receiving HTML. It's sending an API call. It's receiving back JSON data. It puts that into a cascading style sheet, shakes it up, and renders a pretty web page for you. But the cool thing about that is you can actually take that, right click in your browser, inspect elements, and you will see all of the API calls that are being made by your browser as you're navigating around in the UI. You
Oh,
can
it
copy and
reminds me of
paste those,
Onyx.
copy paste that into a Python script, and you are now DevOps. Go back and ask for a pay
Yeah.
raise. That's the way the world should be. That's modern,
Yeah.
right? That's
Mm.
And is it friendly with vDefend? If vDefend, you know how vDefend doesn't like seeing a lot of stuff happening via API running through the system. Is it friendly with vDefend?
very, very much. They're kind of our yeah, we very much are hand in hand on that regard. VDefend and Avi, both of us are dealing with security, et cetera. We do so in a little bit different ways because we both attack different angles of vulnerabilities, but very much that is the case.
Yeah, I figured as much. Half joking there, but yeah, I know we're running close on time, and I'll leave John and Jad. If you have any closing thoughts, I'll give you a moment. But the last question I have for you is just sort of like, how do people that are interested in Avi, how do they learn more? What would you advise people to do if they wanted to actually start looking into? Keep juggling, John. What would you advise for people to actually get started with Avi? What would be the first step?
One of the first steps, you're certainly welcome to go and download the software, try it out in your own environment. But if you really do want to get yourself, tiptoe into this, we do have a couple of different workshops that are available. There's an intro, just a 60-minute, and it just walks you through a little bit of like 2 slides, and then we drop you into some labs, and you can do this yourself. And if you want to learn a little bit more, we have a free, it's 3 half-day class, and that's free as well. And that's something where we'll get in under the hood and kind of separate the marketing from the reality, and just really delve deep into this. So you can do this, learn everything in detail about this. So that's something that we run these regularly, just about every quarter in different geos. And that's something that's been hugely popular for just about every person who's come into Avi and started using Avi. They first go through this entry path because it's an easy way to anonymously or not, be able to learn Avi, drop onto some onto real hardware, real software, and start putting it all together and seeing what happens.
Hey,
I like it. I like
I
it.
got one for you, Nathan. What's the most creative way you've seen someone totally screw up load balancing in their environment?
Oh, there's just nothing I haven't done wrong, and I haven't seen. Wait, you're talking people are all right, an anonymous person.
Customers, people, anonymous people.
I don't. All right, I'll tell you one time when one of the three times that this person had took Yahoo down once upon a time is that when I was a young kid, I was much younger. I had, my hair was about out to here, and I was working in Europe. And Europeans should know better than to let an American, deal with anything on their environment. But they had me dealing with their GSLB for Yahoo and going in and deploying which data would go here, which requests would go to which country. And so I was running through this list, and then they left me alone at 3 a.m. and they just went off to go have dinner or something and came back a couple hours later. And I got to the end of this list and I realized, and keep in mind, I was much younger, but I got to the end of this list and realized, you're going through and, dot US, well, that would go to the US, right? You're kind of going through this list here. Dot FR goes to France and dot DE goes to Denmark and I get all the way to the list and I have extras left over. I'm like, I don't know where these countries go. Wait a minute. And it just kind of started cascading because .de, I didn't know those Deutschland, not Germany.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And so they've got various countries started going to different, getting different languages, and it was a mess. That was one of three times I took Yahoo down.
One of three times.
Yeah, I'm not kidding.
That's quite the claim to fame there.
So you're the anonymous person.
I mean, yeah. That other guy.
Some guy with a similar haircut. Absolutely.
Good.
Good stuff, Nathan. Listen, John's gonna keep juggling while I do this outro. Thank you so much for joining us on Virtually Speaking. And for those listening, continue to watch this series on VCF's YouTube channel, link below. And and then look for bonus features where John juggles more than just oranges.